I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. This is the second in our reloading series. If you guys missed last week's episode, please go back and check it out. It'll tell you about how we're going to attack this subject and how we're going to go about things. This week, we're going to talk about what kind of preparation we need to do to our brand new Winchester brass that's never been fired before. Now, the Winchester brass, when it comes in a Ziploc plastic bag. Now, these bags usually sit in a bin in retail store shelves. They've been dropped, knocked around. They've pretty much had a harsh life. And they're only brass. They're not any kind of heavy-duty steel or anything, so these thin case necks get bent out of shape just a little bit banging around in those boxes. So our first step when we prepare these is to get these case mounts back to round. Now, if we were just making some plinking ammunition, it doesn't matter a massive amount, because when we push the bullet into it with a boat tail bullet, it's going to round that mouth back out. However, because brass has a spring property to it, it's going to have inconsistent tension around that mouth wherever one of those dings was pushing in. So we want to get them back to round. That way we have a consistent neck tension all the way around the bullet. Now you'll notice I mentioned that the brass comes in a bag, but now we've got it sitting in these nice reloading blocks. Now, reloading blocks are a great thing to have because they allow you to keep your cartridges separate based upon what charge weights or what process you're in the middle of, but it allows you to group them separately, and as you pick up a case and do processes to it, you can move it to the next block and sit it down. That way, if you have to stop for whatever reason, you know which cases have had what done to them. Now, you can go to the store or you can go to the online shops and you can see all of these loading blocks that are made out of plastic and wood and even built aluminum. They're very nice. They're eye candy for your bench. I would love to have some built aluminum ones just because they are neat looking. I'm kind of a gear guy. I like, little things that are shiny. It's kind of like a crow or even, a weasel or something, I guess. I like shiny things. So nice shiny reloading blocks are great, but they're also usually expensive. So as a beginning reloader, don't buy the shiny stuff. Get the stuff that gives you the best return on your investment. And you really can't get a better return on your investment than something that works for free. What I've found, and what you'll notice I'm still using, are these neat little plastic trays. Now, some of you guys that are pistol shooters are looking at these and you're smiling right now. What this is right here is a plastic tray out of a box of Federal American Eagle 230 grain 45 ACP pistol ammo. It's just a throwaway plastic tray. These are the dividers that they have inside the boxes. You can find them stacked in the trash can at your local range. They are great. They are perfectly sized, almost as if they were designed to do the job for 308 class cartridges. Now, you can also use these for 223, but they're a little bit loose in there. For 223, I prefer to either use 40 caliber or 9mm caliber dividers. The shells fit in there, the cases fit in there just a little bit tighter. They don't shake around as much. If you bump it while it's on the table, it's less likely to shake powder out of the cases, etc. But they're free. You can find them in the trash can usually. They're good to go. I have a bucket of them around here somewhere. I almost always keep some on hand because if they get messed up, worn out, dirty, etc., pick them up, throw them away, grab another one. They are very good to go, and the most important thing, they're free, which is very important if you're a starting reloader. So we've set our cartridges into the blocks. First thing we're going to need to do is we're going to set up a die in order to push those dings out of the case mouths. Now, as far as dies go, I recommend the Lee Deluxe die set. Now, there are more expensive dies out there. However, the results that I've gotten from the Lee dies make me really question if I need to spend the money for the higher quality dies. The lead dies in the deluxe set gives you a full-length sizing die, a neck sizing die, and a bullet seating die. Those are the 3 dies that you are going to use the most in precision rifle reloading. Now, these are in the yellow box. If you see the lead die set in the red box, that is actually the regular die set, and in that die set you have a full-length die, you have a bullet seating die, and you have a factory crimp die. Now, the factory crimp die you're going to use very, very rarely in precision rifle reloading. You're going to use either the neck or the full-length seating die much more often, so I recommend getting the anniversary set. We'll talk about crimping when you want to crimp and when you don't want to crimp a little bit later when we get into bullet seating. But just for now, know that this is the one that I recommend, the deluxe die set. Now, to punch those dings out of the cartridge necks, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the neck sizing die and we're going to set it up into our single stage press here. In order to set that die in the press, what you will do is first bring your ram all the way to the up position, and then you're going to screw in the seating die. Make sure your lock ring on the die is turned all the way back. You will screw in the neck sizing die until you contact the ram, the shell holder in the ram. Once you contact the shell holder, you're going to bring the ram back, you're going to screw it in one more turn, and then you're going to turn the lock ring down and lock the die down. Now what that's done is it's set it in a position so that when you run that cartridge all the way up, or when you run the case all the way up into the die, the shell holder, which is the thing that holds the bottom of the case, the shell holder will hit the bottom of the die and it will push this little sliding collet up in there, and that's what grips the outside of your case neck and smashes it in to get it back to the correct size. Then when you bring your ram back down, it pulls it back out and it pulls over the center stem, which is a mandrel that pushes it back out to the correct size to hold the bullet. Well, we don't really care about crushing the neck back down to hold a bullet because these have never been fired, so the necks have not been blown out on them. The necks should have enough tension already to hold the bullet correctly. We just want to get the dings out of them. So all we're going to do is take one of these cartridges, or one of the cases, we're going to slip it onto the shell holder, and then we're going to run it up, and we'll feel it stop. Now what you're feeling is the neck is too small to go over that center mandrel. Pull it down just a little bit harder and you'll feel the neck stretch over it, and now it's gone over the mandrel. Now if there was any inconsistencies in the shape of the neck is now stretched out to round. We're going to go ahead and run it back down, and that's all there is to it. Now that neck is as perfectly round as you can get it. Now if you have one that for some reason you start to take it up on there and you don't feel that stop and you don't feel that tension, go ahead and run it all the way up in and crunch that neck back down so it'll actually hold a bullet. I suggest when you bring it out, you mark that case and you set that one aside though. You don't want to use that for your load workup because the neck tension is probably going to be considerably different on it than the rest of the ones that you're using. So just know, anytime you get a case in any one of the operations that you're going through that's a little bit different than the others, it's a good idea to mark it so that you know later on when you get to the firing process that that one is different. Use it as a sighter round, use it as something that you are not going to hinge a decision on. You don't want that one in the middle of your accuracy node when you're doing your workup and it to cause an inconsistency that will skew your results. So if you get one that's a little bit weird, mark it and set it aside. If you get one that's a lot weird, mark it and don't use it. Now, once we've got that neck pushed out to perfectly round, the first operation that I like to do is to deburr the flash hole in these. Now, when the flash hole is punched in these cases, and in most cases except for instance, Lapua, it's actually punched by something that appears to be a nail. It just drives through and drives a hole into it. Lapua cases are drilled, so they actually have a drill bit that goes through them. In most cases, you will end up with some burrs on the inside of the case. Now the reason the burrs are bad is when you get that flash that goes through that flash hole in the case, it can't expand in an even manner because you have little pieces of metal in the way. So what we'll do is take a flash hole deburring tool, which is just basically a countersunk drill bit, and we'll run it in and just knock that burr off so that it's now countersunk, and now when the flash goes through that flash hole, it can expand in a consistent manner. Now I use the Lee flash hole deburring tool, and when you buy it, it comes on this nice wooden handle, and this is the tool right here in the center position on my trim mate. Now it's threaded, so you can unscrew it from the handle and you can screw it right into the trim mate if you have a trim mate. If you don't have this kind of investment straight off the bat, then there is nothing wrong with using it as a hand tool. You're just going to simply stick it through the case mouth, you're going to make a couple of turns on it, and you're going to be done. Now they do have this little shouldered stop on these tools. Most of the deburring tools have them. I run the shouldered stop all the way back because I run several different types of cases, so I don't want to have to keep adjusting the stop every time I run a different case. However, if you're only doing one caliber, you will get your best consistency by setting that stop to a specific depth where you're only cutting away the flash, you're not getting down into the head of the case. The way we're doing it here, all you want to do is just make a couple of turns to knock that off and then be done. You're not trying to drill a hole through this case. You can go too far and you can damage the case. Now I'll show you with it powered. All we're doing is we're just going to turn it on, or drop the case on it for a couple of turns and then pull the case off. That's it. That's all we did. Just brought it down, touched it, let it turn a couple of times, and then back up. On new cases, because they're still extremely shiny inside, you can actually look down and you can see your work. And I can see that I've got a nice consistent countersink all around that I've knocked any flash off. So now I have a nice clean flash hole in this case. There's nothing to obstruct the flash from the primer going into the powder column. Now the next thing I like to do is I like to deburr the inside of the case. Since we use boat tail bullets, I want to get it in here and get a really nice contoured entry, a little funnel, to allow that boat tail to come into the neck without scraping off any copper, without gouging the side of the bullet or causing any damage to the side of the bullet. So we've got this little tool here that looks like a big countersunk drill bit. We are not trying to put a razor's edge on this case. We're not trying to actually sharpen the case mouth. All we're trying to do is just drop it on there to knock the edge off, and that's it. And again, all it takes is a couple turns of the tool. That's it. And that gives us a nice beveled edge for that bullet to seat against. Now this is a Lee deburring tool. It's a VLD deburring tool. It has a very sharp angle to it, whereas the standard deburring tools have a shallower angle to them. This is made specifically for boat tail bullets like we use. Now again, this one comes in the package on a wooden handle. The wooden handle is fine. You can use a wooden handle to turn it. It just takes a little bit of extra time. It also is threaded, so it drops right into the center. The last tool that we're going to use is a primer pocket uniformer. Now, as the previous tools, you'll notice a pattern here. It comes threaded on a handle. It's this little tool right here. And what this is going to do is it's going to cut our primer pockets to a uniform depth. This way, when we go through and we seat each one of our primers, they will all be exactly the same depth in relation to the case head here. That way, the firing pin is going to hit each one with the same amount of force, and the firing pin is going to indent the same distance in each one, which should, in theory, give us a consistent flash on each primer, consistent ignition on each primer. So that's important. If this tool is not mandatory, I got along for a long time without it, but I would notice that as I was seating the primers that every now and again I would get a high primer because I'd have a little bit more flow in that case than I would on another one, or I'd have a little bit extra crud built up in the corners of the primer pocket that I didn't get. I would notice every now and again when I would go to seat it, one would be harder than another. So this is a great tool to cut everything to an even depth. This way we're starting with a consistent depth to the primer pocket before we seat our primers. On this one, we're going to cut and we're going to continue to cut until the tool stops. I like the redding tool because it is non-adjustable. What you get from the factory is what you get. Some of the tools, they have a little Allen screw or a little set screw in the side of them so you can adjust the depth that it cuts the primer pocket. I don't like that because there is the possibility of that screw backing out, your depth changing. Then when your depth changes, you may go through and cut 30, 40 cases and not realize that your depth's changed, and you just destroy those cases. It's possible to cut the primer pocket deep enough that you don't get reliable ignition. The primer's in too far for you to hit it with the firing pin. So I like the non-adjustable tool. It seems to work very well. Now you'll notice when I do this, I keep a little brush next to the station here. Because this tool indexes on the case head, sometimes it'll get little brass shavings between the case head and the shoulder on the tool, and you won't get a consistent depth. So I'll hit the tool with the brush to knock those shavings off, and I'll cut again. And usually by the second cut, you'll feel the tool stop cutting on the case. You'll feel that the rotational force will lessen and lessen until it takes less force to hold it in position. And that's when you know it's pretty much done cutting. And that's it. And we can flip the case over and we can look into the primer pocket and you can see the shiny part where it's cut it. And we're just trying to get uniformity across all our cases. And that is all we need to do to those. Since these are brand new cases, we are not going to worry about cutting them or trimming them to length. They are all within spec for the vast majority of chambers out there. You can cut them if you wish. There may be a couple of thousandths difference from case to case, but that's not going to make a big difference in what we're doing here. After we fire them for the first time, they will grow, so we will trim all of them. Every single one of these cases will need to be trimmed after the first firing to bring them back to a consistent length. So we'll get to that shortly. We're going to switch over and set up our priming tool, and I'll take you through priming these cases. Now for this, we're going to use Federal Gold Medal Match large rifle primers. There are a bunch of primers out there. There are CCI, Bench Rest, there are Wolf. I have not tried the Wolf. I have had success with CCI primers in the past. I just settled on Federal primers because I can buy them by the case locally. They are good primers, they're very consistent, and they do what I need them to do. So we're going to use a Lee hand priming tool for this. I've actually had this tool for quite some time. I got it when I first started reloading. It came in the Lee anniversary kit and is an excellent, excellent tool. It has a hopper that will hold a couple hundred primers. I usually only put 100 at a time in here. It takes a little bit different shell holder than the standard shell holders for the press, so that's one drawback, is you need to buy a set of shell holders for it. But it gives you a great amount of control when seating the primers. When you go through, you can tell if every now and again you get one that's goofed up, because when you go to seat it, the tension will go up greatly and you can stop. You don't have to worry about detonating a primer on it. So the feel is very important. That also gives you feedback on if you're cleaning your primer pockets correctly, if you need to cut them to consistent depth, etc., because you can feel every time you squeeze this. The disadvantage is it takes hand pressure and it can wear your hand out after a little while working with it. So to fill it with primers, we just take our little safety cover off of here. We open our primers up, and this is the tricky part, to get these primers in here without making a mess and dumping primers everywhere. So you gotta be careful, because primers do have a tendency to jump out and take off running across your floor, and they're one of those things that you really, really do not want to suck up into a vacuum cleaner. If you're doing the vacuuming, it can scare the crap out of you. If your significant other is doing the vacuuming, it may end your reloading hobby very quickly. So make sure you keep track of them. Be careful that they don't take off and go running. Now, once we've got our primers into the tool here, we just need to shake it, and it's got these little grooves, little radial grooves in the tray, and as we shake it, it will flip the primers over until all the primers have the cup down. They all have to have the cup down before we go to loading, because if you load a primer flipped into a case, it's a huge pain in the butt and it will not fire with the primer upside down. So shake them, and we're going to make sure that we get them all with the cup down. That's all it took. Every now and again you'll get a stubborn one right in the middle of the pack that doesn't want to flip. Just change directions, shake it a little bit of a different direction. Now we're going to put our cover back on. Now you'll notice one thing right now. I am wearing safety glasses. This is one place you do not goof around. You're applying pressure to the back of a pressure-sensitive explosive device. Do not goof around here. Make sure you're wearing eye protection. It is way too easy to get this thing pointed in the wrong direction, squeeze a primer, crunch it, and have it go off, and have that flash come out. I haven't had it happen yet, but there's a first time for everything, and with my luck, the first time that happens will be the time I'm not wearing safety glasses. Now we've got our primer set up in here. We're just going to take one of our cases that we need to prime. We're set down on the shell holder, and we're going to give it a nice, easy press. And that's all there's to it. You will feel it press up in there, release the pressure, and slide it off. Now, as I'm going through and doing this, it's very easy to get into a rhythm and doing it quickly. So I'm making a point when I pull the cartridge off of the priming tool to run my finger across the back of it. So I'm visually looking and seeing that there's a primer set in it, but I'm running my finger across it to feel if the primer is too low, if the primer is too high, if there's something goofed up with it. Now, since we've cut these with our primer pocket uniformer, when I run my finger across it, it is very, very uniform. It's a perfect height. So the primer pocket uniformer has done its job, and that one's ready to go. This case is now ready for us to load our test charge in. So we're going to put it in our loading block here, grab the next case, and the same thing. It's really that quick as we go through here. Now after you get through about 20 of these, you'll want to switch hands and switch directions. The nice thing about this tool is it's contoured. It feels pretty good in your hand. You'll just get tired of that motion after a little while. You do about 300 cases, you're going to start to get a little fatigued, so take a break. That way you're seating them with the same amount of pressure. If anything goes strange, anything feels weird, just stop. I've had situations before where I've had a primer going sideways and it's gotten kinked up, and I've had to stop and disassemble the tool to take the cartridge out or take the case out. This should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Never, ever, ever prime a case that has powder in it and a bullet seated. I don't know why you would ever need to do that, but never, ever, ever, ever do it. It's just not worth the risk. Take your kinetic bullet puller, pull the bullet, dump the powder, then prime it. Don't ever try to prime it with powder in the case. I know at some point, somewhere, somebody has felt the need to do it. The risk is too high. Don't do it. Take the extra few minutes to dump it. Worst comes to worst, just throw that cartridge out. It'll be done. You know, grab the bullet with a pair of pliers, rip it off, and call it quits on that cartridge. It's not worth blowing up in your face. That's all for this week. We've got our cartridges ready to go. Now, a lot of you guys sent me questions on military brass, on how to prep it. We are going to cover those when we cover prepping our once fired brass. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we go about setting our charge weight increments, how we come up on what powder we're going to use and what bullet we're going to use. We'll set up our load increments to take them out to the range, and we'll demonstrate to you how we go through that. Once we get done with our initial workup and we figure out what load we're going to settle on, then we're going to come back and we're going to take those cases that we use for the workup, we're going to clean them, and we're going to show you how to prep once fired cases. And as I said, then we'll get into talking about how we'll prep military brass and how we'll prep other types of once fired brass. So if you have questions on that, please leave it in the comments section and we'll make sure we get to it. If you've liked this video, make sure you click that thumbs up button. If you're a subscriber, thanks. If you're not a subscriber, please click that subscription button. Thank you for watching, and until next week, get out and shoot.